Hello, this is Dr. Mercy, and I am going to be responding to the celebration of Juneteenth. Lest we forget Juneteenth, of June, and looking at America through African American eyes. June is important to me because this is the time that I also started my research on HIV/AIDS. It was my birthday, it's Juneteenth, and it's a time also where President Obama gave a speech on the soil of Africa in Egypt at the University of Cairo, where he also quoted the Holy Quran and emphasized how the Holy Quran teaches about how God tells us to tell the truth. This was impressive in the sense that it teaches us that the Holy Bible, to some extent, complements itself with the teachings of the Holy Quran. I am going to quote the verse in Ezekiel from the Holy Bible, where it states that the diseased have ye not strengthened, neither have ye healed that which was sick, neither have ye bound up that which was broken, neither have ye brought again that which was lost, but with force and cruelty have ye ruled them. I find this as a biblical message that comes especially as President Obama signed to extend sanctions on Zimbabwe. And it is also in June, as we are celebrating Juneteenth, that he gives PM Changirai of Zimbabwe 73 million, which some would find as breadcrumbs in the sense that the sanctions have ruined Zimbabwe to a point where the unity government of Zimbabwe has estimated that $10 billion will be needed to address the problems imposed or experienced from the imposition of sanctions. President Obama, you mentioned that the reasons you are not lifting sanctions on Zimbabwe are because of human rights, democracy, and rule of law. And I find it ironic in the sense that these are the same problems that we also have in the United States, yet there are no sanctions. And you will be amazed to find that you extend sanctions that are going to impact orphans. And the double standards of the foreign policy are not in line with what we experience here when we read the history of Juneteenth. Here, most of us might wonder what exactly sanctions are in Zimbabwe. Ladies and gentlemen, do not be fooled when you hear that sanctions are only travel sanctions. I did a thorough research since I'm interested in doing research on families, and when you hear sanctions, it's not about travel. Zimbabwe, when President Bush put the sanctions, Zimbabwe was banned from using the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It was banned from using International Development Association, from using Inter-American Development Bank, from using Asian Development Bank, from Inter-American Bank, American Investment Bank, from using African Development Bank, from using European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, for using Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. And you bear in mind that Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency is important in underwriting loans between governments. This is a cruel bill that was signed by President Bush in 2001 after being sponsored in US 10 million by Mrs. Hillary Clinton, given to Tsvangirai, and also Mr. Joe Biden, who also sponsored the Sanctions Act with 10 million. They should have expired March 2009, but surprise, surprise, President Obama extended the sanctions. Lest we forget Juneteenth. If we look closely at the history of Zimbabwe, sanctions have been placed from the 1800s. If you find here, the British who colonized Zimbabwe, they did social injustice, and she was the queen of Mbuya Eneanda of Zimbabwe. She was lynched in 1890s for speaking against British enslavement of people of Zimbabwe, and this was human rights abuse on England, on Zimbabwe. Chimurenga was started by this lady, and then here, when we hear of unity government of Zimbabwe, it comprises Mugabe, Tsvangirai, and Dr. Mutambara. Now, when we find that President Obama, instead of lifting sanctions, he only tells the world that he will only give 73 million to Tsvangirai, and yet the unity government has estimated that Zimbabwe, after ruined by sanctions, is going to need $10 billion. I'm surprised that PM Tsvangirai even accepts a pledge of 73 million. So please, President Obama, it is time to respect the unity government of Zimbabwe. Quit, please, cherry picking and favoring Tsvangirai, because we see this as a bailout. If we look at the history of Zimbabwe, you'll find Ian Smith was supported by Israel and UK, and he had segregation. And now here, if we look at the history, please, social injustice has been imposed by Rhodes, Smith, Bush, and then Mr. Obama. You promised change, but there is no change. From the Bible, I will quote Timothy 5 verse 1. It says, "Rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as the father." And in our culture, no matter how horrible an elder is, you do not rebuke them, you give them respect. And so as we go back to Juneteenth, if we did not celebrate it, it's an F. You talk of human rights and the sanctions. Girls are now trading their bodies, girls as young as 10 years, just to buy a packet of cookies or candy. They are having to trade their bodies. And this needs to be stopped through lifting sanctions. And please, we need peace in Zimbabwe. And in conclusion, we need to say, lift the sanctions in Zimbabwe so that there will be peace in Zimbabwe.